Welcome to Mastering Fundraising, a podcast for nonprofit leaders of all titles and all experience levels. Mastering fundraising endeavors to cover the most important fundraising topics with the goal of helping the audience reach their full potential as fundraisers. This podcast will share stories, tips, and guidance on the most important elements of fundraising. If you want to earn an advanced degree in fundraising, this is the podcast for you. Mastering Fundraising is a collaboration between Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership and the 5-Tool Fundraiser, two leaders in providing relevant and expert content to fundraisers and nonprofit leaders. Without further delay, let's jump into the current episode. Please join me in welcoming your host for today, Chris Looney.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. This is Mastering Fundraising, the podcast where we dive deep into the strategies, structures, and stories that shape exceptional fundraising results. Today's guest is Anna Lee, Executive Director of the AIP Foundation, the philanthropic arm of the American Institute of Physics. The AIP Foundation is dedicated to advancing scientific discovery, supporting education, and strengthening the physics community through philanthropic partnerships. Anna's leadership centers on building meaningful relationships with donors and funders and creating shared frameworks that help both the organization and its supporters drive measurable, mission-aligned impact. In this episode, we explore co-creating impact with donors and funders across individuals, foundations, and corporations. Anna brings significant experience translating organizational priorities into compelling opportunities that resonate with diverse partners. So we'll discuss how to collaborate with funders from the earliest stages, how to design partnerships that reflect shared values, and how to communicate impact in ways that deepen trust and inspire long-term commitment. Anna, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Chris. I'm so excited to be here, and I really appreciate this opportunity to talk about AIP Foundation and to have this conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. You bet. This is going to be a great conversation. So let's jump in. But before we dig into the co-creation of partnerships topic, let's start with a little background on you. Can you tell us a little bit about your leadership journey and what ultimately led you to the AIP Foundation?
Yeah, sure. Well, in a former life, I studied telecommunications, and I won't go too deep into that, but I had a technical degree, and I was in the field of telecommunications for a few years out of college. I was working at a major defense contractor consulting firm on a project with one of the agencies in the Department of Defense. And the urge to create positive social impact really overcame me, became louder and stronger, which I've always had, but just became very loud. And I decided that I'm going to switch careers so I can really go down the path of creating positive social impact. And the way I decided to do that was to go get my MBA in
Ah,
Spain. And that way, I had a couple of goals there with not only to get my MBA, but to be immersed to a different culture and to learn Spanish and go to a great school. And so I ended up getting my MBA as a way to start switching my career. And
right.
I took a scenic route, but eventually I ended up in fundraising. So that's where I've been for the last like 20 some years.
Wow.
And it's been a blast. I've been able to be on-site campaign director, been able to work on multi-million-dollar campaigns, be able to work in corporate relations. And this opportunity to join AIP Foundation sort of popped up as, most opportunities do,
Right.
unexpectedly. And I took the opportunity because it seemed like a great chance to make a lot of impact on a field of physical sciences that really impact humanity and the future of discovery and innovation on this planet. So, and at the time, the foundation was new. I mean, it still is new. It was launched in 2020, so we're only 6 years old. But I joined in 23, and so it was really fledgling. And so it was a great opportunity for me to really have an imprint on this foundation and
Yeah.
elevate philanthropy for in the physical sciences for the benefit of humanity.
I love it. Wow, that's great. Kudos to you for being a champion of the philanthropy that supports science. I just think it's so important to our world and our future. So I'm grateful to know that someone as capable and successful as you is leading the charge there. Of all
Thank
these
you.
roles that you've had in your journey, what's been your favorite so far? I don't necessarily mean the title or the job, but like
Mhm.
what aspect of the work
Mhm.
is most exciting to you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say I've been lucky that I've enjoyed all of my professional roles in fundraising and even in non-fundraising, and they have all shaped me in different ways.
Good.
Um, but I think this current role I have at AIP Foundation as the executive director is one of the most enjoyable ones because, like I said, it's really an opportunity to build something
Mm,
highly impactful, again, that has the possibility to really impact humanity in a big way because we support the scientists that discover the breakthroughs. And so I really like that. And again, it's it's new. And so I get to kind of build this thing with a team, of course, that is going to kind of create this philanthropic engine for AIP to advance its mission. And some of the things I enjoy is, we talk about partnerships, and people think about external partnerships when you hear that term, right? Which is certainly very important, and we'll talk about that later today. But
right.
one of the things that I enjoy is the internal relationships and partnerships that you have to build before you can go out to the external partners. So
Right.
understanding, what your program teams are doing, like what research is being done or
That's a good
what are we
point.
doing
Yeah.
with students. And so my team and I have been building these bridges of internal partnerships at AIP, which are equally important to understand the impact of those programs so that we can go out and talk about them, understand the direction, understand their needs and priorities in order to attract external partnerships.
Yeah, that's wonderful. It brought up two really important points that I think need to be recorded before I lose them. And the first is you're being asked to understand the language of physics in a way that you can then translate it to donor audiences that make sense and get those donors excited about supporting the project. And sometimes it's building the relationship internally with people that are working on the programs so that they can be involved with the
Hmm.
donors themselves, right? So you have to recruit them and train them how to raise
Hmm.
money. And then you have to be that dictionary, if you will, thesaurus, I don't know, but try to figure out the right way to communicate or translate the very scientific to the very plain, right? And
Yeah.
I'm sure you have done that frequently. The second thing I would mention, and then I'll let you respond, is that it's not lost on me that the best fundraisers are entrepreneurs. Your excitement around building something is very typical with the best fundraisers I know. They love to not be stewards of something already built and just sort of monitor the dashboard, but to actually build the dashboard, to create a program, to do something new and adventurous. And so I
Right.
think that I just wanted to connect on those two things.
Yeah, absolutely. The second thing you said about being entrepreneurial, I think that's going to tie in very much into our conversation about co-creating with
Good.
donors later on. So I'll bookmark that. But the other thing you
Perfect.
said about translating, I think that's a key skill that fundraisers have is being that translator between the donor and your programmatic staff and your leadership. And I think I did this quite a bit when I was at the University of Maryland. I was working in corporate and foundation relations. And as you can imagine, like corporate world, corporate speak is very different from, like higher ed or nonprofit speak. And but there's definitely alignment and they have similar goals. So it's a matter of bringing that together through a common language. And so, yeah, it was a lot of interpreting what the company wanted with what the program was able to offer, and bringing that alignment together with some common language.
Yeah. Well, our next podcast episode, I'm already planning it out, is going to be on being the translator as a fundraiser.
Oh, I
So
love it. Oh,
I,
that's great.
I, it's a great topic, and we could do podcast number 3 on entrepreneurism. So
There you go.
we'll bookmark that. But in the meantime, next question is along that path, who have been sort of the important mentors that have influenced your career, and why were they so important to you?
Yeah, great question. And I think not just mentorships, but in my various roles with different nonprofits, I've had the tremendous opportunity to work with volunteer leaders, who are some of the smartest, most influential people that you'll ever get, or at least I'll ever get to meet. Like, people who are, four-star generals or Nobel Prize winners or CEOs of Fortune 50 companies,
Right.
right? These are people who I interact with on boards or in committees who participate with the nonprofit, and I've just loved seeing them, observing them in how they interact with people, and it's just amazing that some of again these high profile, high level people are the most down to earth, the most
Love
humble
it.
people, and you can see how they interact with folks from all walks of life, all levels of professional background, and how they really exude like leadership, but through humility and communicating through building personal rapport. And that's
Yeah.
really, it, it left an impression on me how, like the CEO of like the one of the biggest banks in the country is just so humble, and the way that he talks about his
Yes.
ideas, like it's not just
Yes.
this is what we're going to do, right? Or, people who have a Nobel Prize, giving their suggestions, and it's so just seeing that has been very inspirational. Being a servant leader or being a humble leader, I've really enjoyed seeing that through my work with those volunteers.
I love that. Yeah, that's so important to acknowledge the fact that your mentors don't have to come from bosses or supervisors. In our field, right? They can come
Mhm.
from the board members, the volunteers, the donors who have so much to teach about how the world works and how you should um, be in the world as a servant leader. So thank you so much for sharing that. Well, with all of that mentorship and all of that learning and the journey over the years, how would you describe your sort of leadership philosophy, especially when it's at the intersection of mission, philanthropy, and community?
Mhm. Well, I like to say that I have a business mind and a nonprofit heart. And that's
Lovely.
how I bring together mission with
Mm,
fundraising, right? And if you think about it, fundraising is not so different from sales at a company, except that we're selling a mission or a cause.
right.
And you have to promote that mission, you have to market that mission, and you have to compel others to invest in that mission, right? So it's very similar. And I kind of think that's why they call it development instead of business development, because it's nonprofit business development in a way. And so, yeah, so that's how I kind of bring it together is looking at, the business aspect, but through the lens of your stewarding donors' impact, and philanthropic goals, in alignment with what your nonprofit produces, which is a valuable mission, is the benefit to society. And so that's how I think about the intersection of those two things.
Well said. Great. Well said. All right, so let's jump into the topic for today. Understanding co-created impact is where we start. And the question I would ask is, many funders today want to be partners rather than simply contributors. So
Mhm.
how do you define co-creation in a nonprofit fundraising context?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because I think we are familiar with co-creating, but maybe we just haven't talked about it as co-creating. But essentially, it's, understanding your donors' philanthropic goals and their own personal philanthropic mission and
Mm,
vision. And then, of course, understanding your organizational goals and priorities and finding where you have that match, right? The match is where the
nice.
magic happens.
Thank
And
you.
sometimes it's that match that sparks a new idea that is both aligned with your organizational priorities and that donor's philanthropic mission. And then you start to co-create something that's exciting that benefits both parties. So that's how I would think about co-creating impact is it serves both parties and it's maybe a new idea, but still in line with the needs of the organization.
Yeah, perfect. That's great. Why do you think co-created impact is becoming more important across individuals, foundations, and corporate funders?
Well, I think because people really want to have be part of the process in terms of creating that impact, right? Not just give money or write a check, but understand how that impact is made and have some sort of involvement in that impact that's being created. And you definitely see that with corporate donors, right? They are certainly very much interested in being part of that impact creation because they have goals, right? They have business goals that they want to meet. But I think we see that with individuals and foundations too. And it can be a very exciting thing when you have that spark of co-creation, of alignment that meets like a new idea. So I think people want to be involved, and it's also just an exciting process to be part of.
Yeah, it's kind of like being on the ground floor of an investment in a company where you want to not only give the money, but you want to have some influence on the direction that the business will take in the future. And in this case, I'm sure there's these thorny problems, challenges, issues that need physics to solve, and money is the way in terms of funding research or the practical applications of whatever it is, and so it's that match of the donor maybe having a challenge or a concern that it wants to address, having the resources to do that, and then finding the foundation as a partner that can help
Mm.
create the change it wants to see in the world, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And the donors have ideas too. So the
Right.
organization may know that they want to go in a certain direction or have this impact, but we may not know exactly how we're going to do it or what the format is. And you may have a donor that's like, hey, I have this great idea. What if, you did this with me and I help you fund that and helps you achieve your goals? Then, that's part of the co-creation process.
Yeah, I love that because so often I hear organizations almost offended when donors have ideas or want to put money behind something that they're passionate about.
Mm,
And that's not offensive at all. I mean, the organization has to decide whether it fits their mission or if it's something they want to
mm,
choose to be a part of.
right.
That's totally acceptable and understandable. But to think that an organization can get away with only sort of pursuing the things that it wants to do, regardless of what its donors want to do, is a fallacy, I think, in the nonprofit world. And you're much better off finding those partners that and hearing from them about
Mhm.
what they want to do. So when you begin conversations with a donor or partner, what are the clues that help you understand whether co-creation is the right approach?
Yeah. Well, I just want to piggyback off of what you said just now first, which is another way to look at it is the organization doesn't have to have all the answers, right? So
Good.
it
Thank
helps
you.
you bring diverse thinking into that problem space. You
Mhm.
want to help a certain population, but maybe you haven't figured out everything all the programming that needs to happen, and then you have donors
Right.
who've done it or are experts at this, and so just being open to ideas. And again, like when you find that idea that matches both sides, then you have that beautiful co-creation magic. And so your question was about the conversation. You said, how do we?
Yeah. How do you understand whether co-creation is the right approach with certain
Yeah.
prospective donors?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would start with listening, right? That's always, number one skill set in fundraising is active listening. And so listen carefully to what the donor is saying about the kind of impact they want to make through their philanthropy and ask questions to help clarify and align what they're saying with what your organization does. Now, of course, you as a fundraiser would come having done the homework of understanding your organization's direction, its goals, and its priorities, right? So as you're listening, you could kind of be thinking about how these things align.
Mm.
And when you, and again, like maybe it's an area that hasn't been fully fleshed out at the organization, but you know that's the direction it's going in, or that's an area of growth that your leadership is interested in, then you can start having that exchange with the donor to say, well, look, we're kind of headed in this direction. It seems like you're interested in this area. Um, you know, what kind of impact can we have together? And then the donor may have an idea about how to make that come to fruition, right? And that's when you start to ideate on things that are executable and are in alignment with your organizational priorities that also match the donor's goals, right? And then you kind of sharpen that idea, and then you might come up with a new thing that is the outcome of the co-creation.
Yeah, that's great. I'm interested in what it looks like in practice. So you kind of gave me some clues about what it looks like at the beginning when you're trying to
Mm.
identify an opportunity to co-create. But is there a sort of generic real world example that you can walk me through where you co-created something with a donor? And sort of walk me through the from start to finish of the
Yeah.
partnership and what it kind of looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. I actually have two or three, but I'll go with because one was with an individual, another one was with a foundation. So this
Uh,
can happen across sectors, right? And certainly with corporations too. But I'll give you the example of the individual donor. And so first thing, like I said, is do your homework internally, understand what your program needs and where they have priorities and what their vision is. And so one of the things that AIP is very well regarded for is its science policy journalism.
okay.
It does great science policy reporting on what's happening in the government. And so I talked to the program head of this platform, and I said, what do you need? What are your priorities, and what's on your wish list? And he said, well, it would be great if we had an event, maybe like an annual sort of event that convened policymakers and civic leaders and the public for a dialogue around science policy so that we help everyone understand, make sense of all the changes happening in the government and what does that mean for the physical sciences. And so I said, okay, that's great. Like you're looking for sort of a convening to have a public discourse. And then I went to see a donor, and the donor is a former trustee of the foundation, AIP Foundation. And now, at the same time, our inaugural board chair of the foundation was ending her term, right? So she was stepping down as the inaugural board chair, and she is a good friend of this former board member that was visiting.
Mhm. Okay.
And so I I wanted to ask him if he would be interested in making a gift in honor of our board chair as she was stepping off, right? But at the same time, I said, look, this is an area, science policy reporting and journalism and analysis is an area that AIP is very well known for, and we're growing in this area. We're expanding to do more science policy and society kind of stuff. Um, and so sharing the story about where we're headed and where we're interested in going. And from that conversation, he thought, oh, well, what if I helped you endow an annual event that would bring together science policy, like people in the science policy space, and it would be named for this board chair. in her honor.
Perfect.
So it would kind of check all the boxes. We're honoring
Right.
her. It's helping AIP advance is, science policy work, and it's something that he wanted to do. And it wasn't something that I pitched to him per se, right? I just shared like this is where we're growing and this is the direction. And he came up with that. And then of course, I just wanted to make sure that you want to do your other back end homework too, to make sure your leadership is okay with the new initiative because it's a new thing. But
Sure.
everyone was very much on board with it, was fully aligned with our strategy. And so in the end, we were able to establish this science policy forum as a result of that conversation.
Win, win, win. So
Yeah, absolutely.
bravo. Yeah. Well, when you're talking about the similarities and differences of the individual funder groups,
Mhm.
I shouldn't have said individual funder groups, the funder groups, individuals, foundations, and corporations, what are those sort of similarities that they share? What are the major differences?
Yeah, good question. I think the similarities is that they all want to create positive impact in some way, right? They all
Perfect.
want to
Yeah.
make an impact and they all want to get their make sure that their money is going to something that can show results, right?
Good.
I don't want to say return on investment because it's like it's not that sort of return on investment
That's
as you see in
fair. Yeah,
science,
that's
but it's
totally
it's like a
fair to
return
say.
on mission in a way, right? It's a
Right.
return on impact. So you want to you give the money to support a cause and you want to see that they're creating the impact.
ROI,
Yeah,
just
different eye,
impact
but
instead of investment. Very
right.
good. Yeah.
Return on impact. And so I think that's true across the board. But the differences might be in just the how these three types of constituents are built per se in a way. For example, donors, individual donors, I would say give because they're passionate about something, they believe in something, they're altruistic, and they want to see certain change in the world. And that, of course, that's very general, and there might be exceptions, but generally speaking. And then corporations, they have business goals to meet, whether it's recruiting a STEM pipeline or part of,
Perfect.
increasing their brand awareness or, making sure they hit their corporate responsibility goals, right? So they would approach philanthropy a slightly different way from that lens. And foundations too, they have funding strategies. They have giving priorities based on the mandate of, you know, their own board and their leadership. So they have to give within the guidelines of their giving priorities and their grant making strategy. So that's another different angle.
Yeah. How do you navigate the additional layers that companies have, like brand, employee engagement,
Mhm.
sustainability priorities, all of these other things? It seems a little more onerous. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems a little more challenging to account for all of those factors.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I've been there. Like I said, I was in corporate relations for a number of years, and it is very different from working with individuals or foundations, right? Because there's so many layers, and there's not really ever one decision maker. We kind of joke around, say it's decision by committee with a corporation because you have to
Right,
get
right.
buy-in from different folks, and there's maybe budget across different teams. So it is more legwork that has to be done to understand that corporation and how it works and what drives their philanthropy. Or sometimes it's not to us it's philanthropy, but for them it's a different shade of money, right? Sometimes it's a sponsorship, sometimes it's marketing. So it's understanding how that corporation works and what are their business goals. If recruiting STEM talent is one of their goals, then that's how you shape that strategy, and talking to the people in that space will probably help move you along. But if it's like CSR, corporate social responsibility, then that's a different way to frame how you might partner. But you're right, it's more complicated. You end up building sort of a little cadre of folks within the corporation that you lean into because, like I said, they're kind of spread out, and you just have to build a little group of people that are going to advocate for your organization.
Yeah, it's great. Have you identified certain challenges or risks in the sort of co-creation space? And if so, how do nonprofit leaders mitigate those risks?
Yeah, you touched on it a little bit earlier, which is the risk of a donor having an idea that doesn't exactly align with the
Right.
organizational
And the hurt
strategy.
feelings that happen when you have to say no.
Yeah, right, right. So you might, come across a mismatch, like somebody wants to do something super specific, and your organization may not be able to take that on, or it's just not within the mission, right? So I think those are the risks. But I think being transparent on both sides is part of the mitigation strategy, is telling the donor, explaining why, it falls out either outside of the organization's vision or mission, or think about how to make it work. So maybe tweak it. Sometimes it's not a no, we can't do this, but what if we modified it in this way? And in fact, I had a
Right.
donor like that who came to us and wanted to put his money into a very, very specific thing to access like very specific research files in our archives, right? And it's hard to do that programmatically. How do you track who's going to be accessing this particular set of papers versus
Right.
using the
Right. Of
library
course.
as a whole, right? And so it's a little bit unpractical to do that. Um, so that involved communicating with the donor about what he might be comfortable with, and just sharing the challenge of tracking that impact, right? It's just a little bit onerous to have to track that set of access to that set of papers. So having that very transparent communications help the donor see, oh, yeah, you're right. Like, of course, I want to support the work of the archives because they're so important to the physical sciences community. And yeah, of course, I just want to give my money to support all the work that you do so that people can access all the papers. And so he ultimately came around because we were able to express the situation in a clear and transparent way. We weren't, trying to make it work, even knowing that it would be hard to do. So that's just one example. But I think the other thing to mitigate such risk is again being very much aligned with the leadership, understanding what direction they're going in, and as soon as you have sort of a spark of a new idea from a donor, loop in your leadership so they can weigh in to say, oh yeah, this is like along the lines of what we're doing, or no, this is really outside the scope of what we can, execute on. So bringing them
Yeah.
early and not wait till the end.
Perfect. Yeah. Good advice. I also find that um, not committing to anything when that offer is first made,
Right.
but thanking them for the wonderful idea and the generosity of that statement. Um, and obviously it's a big thing, so we'll have to talk about it as a leadership
Mhm.
team. Or better yet, you have certain policies in place for what, sort of ideas you can legitimately pursue or that helps you navigate through channels to determine whether an idea is something you want to pursue or
Absolutely.
not, right? So
Yeah.
those seem to be very good ways to mitigate risk as well. Um, I'm glad there's time for this question on translation because we touched on it earlier.
Mhm.
Obviously, you need to translate technical, specialized work for donors pretty frequently, I'm sure, or sometimes. How do you kind of ensure that donors clearly understand the value and potential of the work your foundation is supporting in that kind of translation?
Well, it's funny because I feel like my donors know more about the world of physics than I do because a
Right.
lot of
A
them
good
are
point.
are either in the physical sciences space or retired, so they're like, way up here with all the physics stuff. So it's up to me to try to understand that in a way that I can continue the dialogue and find
Very
things
good.
that they want to make. Um, But yeah, like one of my former bosses used to say is, and this is when I was working in engine with the School of Engineering, and you can imagine like all the engineering jargon, like
Totally.
and it
Yeah.
was across like 8 disciplines of engineering, so from aerospace to quantum to civil. But we had to talk to donors who were the experts in those fields, right? And
Right.
so she said, you just had to know enough to be dangerous.
Yeah.
And that is so true. Like you don't have to be a physicist or a quantum engineer or whatever, but you have to know some basic terminology to know generally what they're referring to
Yeah.
and be able to kind of speak to that. But by no means being an expert, although I do feel like I got an engineering degree and now I'm getting like a physics degree because a lot
Right.
of the things that we talk about. Um, but at the end of the day, the work that we do here at AIP Foundation is about people. It's about empowering people behind the science. So in that way, there is definitely that common language about how do we uplift, the next generation, foster future STEM talent, or steward the history of the physical sciences to help us discover new breakthroughs.
It's great. Sounds like a lot of storytelling, which um, leads to the next question, which is what role does that storytelling play in helping donors feel like collaborators rather than outsiders?
Yeah, I think storytelling is number one in fundraising, right? Like that's how people remember the impact, how they remember um, the need, the problem when you bring it home in a story. And so I think storytelling is so important, and we try to keep that front and center. I mean, in fact, I would say my team is probably obsessed with storytelling with a strategic purpose, right? Which is to have the call to action to donate at the end. And so storytelling is a great way to illustrate the problem that you're trying to solve in a way that relates to another human being. And so whether that's about a student, undergraduate physics students who faces barriers and how our program helped them overcome the barriers, or how we're able to, document history that would have otherwise been lost forever. I think the stories bring it home and bring it to life to the donor. So I would say that's like a top thing that fundraisers need to do.
That's great. I'm jumping ahead a little bit to kind of trust building, alignment, and
Mhm.
shared accountability as it relates to co-creation. Are there particular tools, dashboards, or communications practices that have helped you maintain alignment with funders throughout the life of a project or a partnership?
That's a good question. I think it depends on the funder or the donor. I mean, if you're talking about grant making foundations, for example, I mean, there's a pretty rigid structure on how they want you to keep them
Right,
abreast of what's happening. So with grants, they build in that process, having like, say, an annual report at the end. Um, but but I think across the board, I mean, I think this goes to good donor stewardship is once you have the gift in hand and you're doing the work, that you should always be going back to the donor to let them know, hey, this is what your money is helping us do. And so I'll give you an example. One thing that we do, we have a major funder who is like an anchor donor to this major campaign we're in. And yeah, they have us do an annual report at the end of the year, but that doesn't mean we don't talk to you for 12 months. So throughout the
right,
year,
good,
we are engaging the program officer, we're engaging the foundation president with updates like, hey, the new cohort of scholarship recipients have been announced. Like, check it out on our website. That kind of information sharing to having face to face. Oh, can we have lunch, come up to you and have lunch just to share what's going on. And then we also do things like creating creative collateral, that's alliteration for you, that
right.
showcase the impact in a visual way. So one thing that we did with this particular donor or funder was created a yearbook of sorts of all the students that their funding helped to provide scholarships for. So it was a yearbook of, like 3 years of scholarship cohorts.
Wow.
And it was a way to say thank you, but you can literally like touch that impact. You flip through the pages and see hundreds of faces, and that brings the impact to life. And so I
It
think those
really
are some of the
does.
ways that you can communicate with funders.
Yeah. And then, of course, anytime a project evolves, challenges arise, there are particular issues
Mhm.
with the project itself. I'm sure you're quick to maintain good communication with them to maintain the trust and reinforce the idea of the partnership.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a huge believer in transparency. I mean, when it comes to nonprofits and fundraising, the only currency you have is trust, right? And so in order to maintain that trust, you have to have transparency and not try to obscure problems that you're facing or hide challenges. And yeah, we were in a situation where we had to change a program in a certain way. And so we looped that funder in very early on and brought them along throughout the entire process of like, this is the challenge. These are the actions we're taking to address this challenge. And here's the progress we're making, right, in addressing this challenge. And then we came out of it with a stronger program, and they were with us the whole way. So it was never a surprise, like, oh, what happened to this program, right? They knew from the beginning the challenges that we were facing, and so exactly like you said, transparency and trust is super important.
Yeah, that's great. So some advice I'd love to have you provide to fundraisers out there, especially that would love to begin incorporating co-creation in their approaches with prospective donors. What advice would you give to fundraisers who are hesitant to invite donors into early stage thinking or program design?
Mhm. I think first of all is to do the internal homework, right? So that you, the fundraiser, have a good understanding of where your organization is headed, what the priorities are, what the needs are. So that's being in tune with your leadership,
Right.
understanding like what are the needs and what direction are we headed in. And then when you go to the donor, share those things. And you don't, like, again, you don't have to come with the solution. You can just say, this is kind of the direction we're going in. And then listening to the donor on their thoughts about, maybe the organization's direction or their personal passions in regards to the space that you're in, asking questions to kind of fine tune that alignment. And you never know, that spark might come up because of that conversation you're having, right? Because if they're not responding to existing programmatic elements, but they might have an idea that fits very well with the direction you're going in, that could be the spark for co-creation. And like you said, you don't commit to anything on behalf of your CEO or your leadership, right? You thank the donor for their great idea, and you can go back and do the homework of making sure this is something that leadership wants to take on, but then you go back to the donor ultimately. But I think just having that understanding of your organization at a high level, and then listening to the donor, and then aligning along the way will help you with the co-creation process.
Yeah, that's right. And I think it's fair to say that the more that you can provide some great ideas to spark a conversation around co-creation, as opposed to coming in blank
Mhm.
and just leaving it up to chance as to what
Yeah.
someone else might offer as a solution or an investment is very wise.
Right.
Um, so let's end with one piece of good advice that you would offer to fundraisers who want to build deeper, more strategic relationships with donors. What would that advice be?
Great question. One piece of advice. Well, I will go back to what I said earlier. I think it's really important to listen and listen more than you speak, because by listening, you understand the other person's position. And when you understand the other person's position, then you can start to frame your strategy on what would compel that person to invest. Right. And so I think, again, active listening is so critical in fundraising. I would start there, and we just have to learn to be good listeners because I think fundraisers, we have to speak a lot in our role, talking, communicating. A lot of fundraisers are extroverts, not all of them. So that's great, but really finding that balance to just stop and listen more than like gush about your programs, which shows your passion, right? People love to gush about the programs. Oh, we're doing this, and here's all the wonderful things. Yes, that's important, but you do want to stop and listen to how the donor responds to understand what really resonates with them. What is the thing that they're finding to be the spark that they'll invest in?
I love it. That's great. Well, Anna, thank you for sharing your insights on co-creating impact with donors and funders. Your perspective highlights how much opportunity exists when nonprofits and supporters step into authentic partnerships and design solutions together. So that concludes today's conversation. If you like what we're putting out there, please, please, please like and subscribe to this podcast. And also be sure to check out our other shows, including Lead for Good and the Nonprofit Edge. In the meantime, take care and thank you again for joining.
Thank you for joining this episode of Mastering Fundraising. We hope the conversation was helpful and invite you to like and subscribe to this podcast for more conversations with extraordinary nonprofit and fundraising leaders. To learn more about Fulcrum Nonprofit Leadership, please visit us on the web at fulcrumleader.com. To learn more about the 5-Tool Fundraiser, please visit us at 5toolfundraiser.com. We want to hear from you. Please share your thoughts and ideas with us at hello@fulcrumleader.com. Thank you for the important work you do to make our world stronger. We look forward to welcoming you back during a future podcast. In the meantime, take care and be well.